Get started. Alrighty, so welcome to class. Couple announcements. First off, on Friday, I actually recorded another short explanation on the N-Body program. I've had a lot of questions on it, so I figured I'd try and explain it in a slightly different way. So you're welcome to watch that. It's only 12 minutes long, I think. Oh yeah, it says right there. Okay, 12 minutes. Also, there is a quiz. The last quiz is going to be due this Saturday. And the Project 7, which is MPI N-Body, that's all labeled wrong. Here, let's edit that. There we go. Okay, that's also due this Saturday. So this is the last official project of the class. Today I'm going to be introducing the extra credit project. And this one will be due the actual last day of class. So there really is no new material. This MPI stuff and the OpenMP stuff, it really is just a matter of practicing and using it. The concepts themselves are pretty simple to explain, at least. So for the rest of the class, you can come if you like. I'm going to be going over, of course, just random programming topics. If you're interested in any of them, please let me know. And I'll give a lecture about it. Recording right now. That's cool. Okay, so to explain the last extra credit project here. First off, this is due August 11th, which is my birthday. So, everyone give me a present along with your submission, and maybe we'll get better grades, huh? First off, since this is the last day of class, no late assignments for this one, okay? And this project is extra credit. This grade will replace your lowest project grade, okay? So I'm being extra generous here. But this is not a parallel assignment, but it is a difficult assignment. So make sure you get started on it soon. So the basic idea, you're going to be shooting down a target with a missile. Both of them rather stupid. And anyway, so we have a rocket with an explosive warhead, no guidance system, which means it's a big bullet. We have to shoot it in the right direction, okay? If you want to think about it, you can put a cloaking system on it, or think we're shooting at a hot air balloon. Either way, we need to figure out which direction to shoot this thing, okay? And that's where the genetic algorithm comes in. But first, we got to talk about the rocket. So the rocket is, of course, governed by Newton's third law. And so we're going to have three basic forces. We have our gravitational force, our thrust force, and then our drag force. And the drag force keeps this from being an easy problem. So we're going to solve this. We take our second order ODE, split it up into two first order ODEs, which gives us 6 equations with 6 unknowns. We can then solve this using a fourth order Runge-Kutta method. Okay, so we have our basic description of the Runge-Kutta method. We have an initial value function where the partial of y with respect to t is equal to some function, and this function is a function of time and y. And of course it's an initial value problem, so we know the starting location and the starting velocity, which is 0. So we pick a step size, delta t, and we then define the following functions where we're at some position at iteration n here, and we have these k's, and we'll get back to that. Anyway, so the next step or location is given by this function, okay, where all the k's are defined down here. So the first k is we evaluate the function at time n and our current location, okay, and that gives us k1. And if you think about this, k1 is actually an estimate of the derivative of delta y delta t. So then what we're going to do is we're going to take this function and we're going to move half a time step. And if we move half a time step, which is this one right here, this portion here, we also have to move our rocket by half a time step. Okay, and since this is delta t times delta y delta t, this gives us yn plus delta y. Does that make sense? Pretty straightforward. And then we do it again, and we get a k3, and we do it again, and we get a k4. You'll notice with the k4, however, we are moving a full time step rather than half a time step. And in the end, we combine all those four things together to get our next position. And so in this case, since we have 6 equations with 6 unknowns, our y is actually the position, x, y, z, and the velocities, u, v, and w. The function f is just what's on the right-hand side here. Sorry, left-hand side, right here. And I've switched the order to make things consistent, but u, v, w, and then f, the force in the x direction, the force in the y direction, and the force in the z direction. All, of course, divided by the mass. And you should note that all of these variables, including the mass, are going to be functions of time. And that will be pretty made clear shortly. So, our missile. We have a warhead mass. I actually went and tried to find like the original missile system and base these numbers off of it. But the missile has a warhead mass of 450 kilograms, diameter of 0.3 meters. I mean, this thing is huge. It's almost a meter. What's a meter? Like that?
0.3 is like a foot, right?
0.3 meters?
It's like a foot.
Is it?
Close to a foot.
Yeah. Okay. Fuel mass of 700 kilograms. There's more gas in this thing than there is warhead. And a drag coefficient of 0.3, that is not, I didn't get that from anywhere. I just changed the numbers until something worked. When fired, the engine produces 263 kilonewtons of thrust with a burn time of 2.5 seconds. Okay, so this is where the mass becomes a function of time, because the fuel mass is going to decrease from 700 to 0 in 2.5 seconds. Okay, so that's something you need to take into account, is that the mass is changing with time. After 2.5 seconds, then the mass just sits steady at 450 kilograms. The warhead has an explosive kill radius of 2 meters, so we have to get this thing really close. I don't know if that's realistic or not either. But if you make it bigger, then we have a problem that's too easy to solve. It's like close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, right?
Probably warheads too.
And nuclear missiles. It was explosive kill radius of 10 kilometers. Anyway, our missile is located in the XY on the ground at 0, 0, and it sits on a platform 3 meters off the ground. So it starts at 0, 0, 3, basically. All right, so our target is located at the following coordinates. Okay, so it's 6,006 kilometers in the air, and it's located some distance away. and it's traveling at a constant velocity of 600 meters per second, which is roughly the top speed of an F-22. So, and it is not affected by gravity, okay? So our target's not falling, it's traveling. Alrighty, so that's the basic setup. So what I would suggest if you're going to do this project is get this working first. Okay, give it a direction and fire a rocket and see if you can get your rocket to actually travel correctly. So now we come to the genetic algorithm part. And maybe you've heard of these, maybe you haven't. When I learned of them, I thought they were super cool. Turns out they're really good for some problems and really bad for others. This is one of those problems where they're really not that great for, but we're going to do it anyway because it's cool. But they work really good if you're like putting pieces together. If you need to know, does the engine work best with this component or this component? Because then you can't use a Newton's method because there's no numbers to solve. You're just picking things. And so a genetic algorithm is really good for problems like that. Anyway, so the basic idea of a genetic algorithm is it emulates the process of natural selection in order to discover the best fit to an engineering problem. Okay, so we have potential inputs to the problem, and in our case, the potential inputs are going to be directions that we're firing our missile. And we have an infinite number of these, and so we need some way to narrow it down, and that's what the point of this genetic algorithm. So each organism is going to be basically a direction. And so a group of organisms is a population, and then each organism is going to be evaluated using a fitness function, which basically says how well does this solve the engineering problem. Our very first population is going to be completely random. We just randomly generate it. And then each organism then is evaluated by the fitness function. A new population is then generated based on the results of the fitness test. And if you look into the literature, there's a lot of different ways to do this, but we're going to be doing the simplest way possible. So the simplest way possible then is we take the two fittest organisms, or basically the missiles that get closest to the target. And then we're going to use those to be the parents of the next generation. And that's explained a little farther down here. So in our situation, each organism is going to have 2 chromosomes. And each chromosome is going to be an angle in spherical coordinates. The 2 angles give us a direction to fire our little missile. So we have an image of this coordinate system. Ta-da! Spherical coordinate systems. We all should be fairly familiar with this. Make sure you're using radians. And the azimuthal angle, that's a funny word, but that's the word, has a range of 0 to 2 pi, so all the way around. Whereas the inclination angle goes from 0 to pi over 2. Okay? Because we can't shoot below the ground. We can determine the normal vector from these angles by setting the radius equal to 1. And then we just use our conversion formulas here. So that would be nx, ny, and nz if we set the radius equal to 1. Because we're saying it's a unit vector. It has a magnitude of 1. Okay, so our chromosomes are actually going to be stored as characters, not numbers. Because if we store them as characters, then we can actually swap values. So we're going to be using a fixed point representation of our numbers. And by using radians, we restrict the number of values to the left of the decimal point to 1. So we know, like if we were using degrees, we'd have to have 3 because we can go all the way to 360. But with radians, we only need to go to 1. And to the right of the decimal point, we are going to have 7 decimal values. This is kind of an arbitrary number. You could increase it to get more precision. So including the decimal point and the new line character, this gives a total of 10 characters for the chromosome array. The genes then are the individual characters, which will consist of random values from 0 to 9. Okay. Accepting the decimal point in the second spot and the new line at the end. We always have to have those in those places. And we're going to account for that in a bit. So in order to actually use these, we need to somehow convert them to an actual number. And so I give you a little code snippet here on how to do that. So we have 2 functions. The first one converts our character to a double using this standard function ATOF. A meaning character to floating point. And then from a double to a character is a little harder. It's been a while trying to research this one. But we take in our double and then we use the sprintf function, and this particular format here gives us what we want. Okay, so this is a printf format if you've ever seen these. The 0 means fill in any blanks with zeros. 9 means 9 spaces. 7 means 7 decimal places. All right, so the fitness function in this case is really simple. We fire the rocket. We fire the missile, and we keep track of how the minimum distance that rocket gets to. Gets to the target. And once the missile hits the ground, we can stop because we know we've hit the ground. And then we return the minimum distance. So the target is traveling, and we're trying to hit a moving target, which is not easy. And so, anyway. All right, so the initial population is completely random. All right, so creating the new generation. First, you want to choose the 2 most fit organisms as the parents of the next generation. Okay, so we have 2 parents, and the very first thing you want to do is actually copy those parents into the new generation. We want to keep them around because they are good. We know that they're the best that we had from the previous generation. To increase diversity in the new population, every child organism should have a 30% chance of being generated completely at random. And this is important because our solution could have multiple possibilities. And so if, and you may or may not see this when you run this, but there's actually 2 possible values where you could be hitting this thing, hitting the target. One is way over here when it first starts, or it'll fire the rocket straight up and wait for the target to travel all the way over here while the missile comes down on top of it. And so if it gets stuck over there, it's funny because it can't actually hit it over there. It can't get within the 2 meters, but it keeps trying. And so you need the randomness to shift it over here. Okay, so you have to have the mutation in there. So otherwise, they're going to be created by the gene crossover algorithm. And the rest of this is just an example of that, or explaining that. But here's the actual algorithm. So we have P0 and P1, which are the parents. C is the child. They are character arrays of size 10. So we have a for loop here. Goes from 1 to 10. And then if we're doing the decimal place or the new line, then we just want to store that and skip everything else. Okay? So then we generate a random number between 0 and 1. And if m is less than 0.2, so that's a 20% chance, then this particular gene is going to be generated at random. Okay? So if we pass that test, and that doesn't happen, then we need to get another random number, which is 0 or 1. Okay, so it's a coin flip. If it's 0, then we're going to use parent 0. If it's 1, we're going to use parent 1. And I'm going to draw you a picture of this just to give you a better idea of how this goes. Pen, that's what I want. So the idea here is if we have two parents, and we have a child. All right, so we're going to loop, this is the chromosomes in each character. So we've got, I don't know, a 0 and a 4, well, 0, and then we'd have a decimal point, and then a 4 and a 3 and a 9 and a 7, okay? And then we'd have the last one here being the new line character. All right, so basically we're going to say 20% chance that these get generated at random. So if we hit that here, then we get just a new number generated completely at random in here. And then we do our coin, so we move on to the next one. That's a decimal point, so we store the decimal point and we move on. The next one is going to be, okay, so it doesn't get mutated because m is 0.5 or something. So we then move on and we do a coin flip and we get a 0, which means we're going to take the 4 from up here and put it in here. And then on the next one, maybe we also get a 0 coin flip. And then the next one, we get a 1 coin flip. And so we're going to put, this guy has an 8. And so we put the 8 in here. Okay, and so we're generating this child based off of the parents. So does that make sense? Okay, so that's the algorithm that I wrote up for you there. And here's just some code snippets here. So if you want to generate a random character between 0 and 9, you can use this int distribution. And then a coin flip, it would be this distribution here. All right, so we can stop the iterations once the direction is found that places the target within the explosive radius of the missile. At that point, we've solved our problem and we can stop. Now I'm asking for a little bit more from this for this project as far as the report is concerned. First off, I want a 3D plot of the final missile intercepting the target. Okay. I want to know the direction, the theta psi directions, as well as short answers to the following questions. First off, does there appear to be more than one possible answer? I gave you that answer just now. So tell me if you see it, and if you don't, then that's fine. Does one of them seem to be more correct than the others? Does the algorithm converge to the same answer if you use a different random seed? And that's very important. A genetic algorithm should converge to the same answer. It may take a different path to get there, but it should always converge. And then this is very important too. If you change delta t in your Runge-Kutta, does that change your answer? And so then I want you to, based off these, answer the question, do genetic algorithms seem like feasible optimization methods to you, and why? Okay. So, any questions on that? Okay. Let me...
Are you going to show us the plot?
Yes, I am.
Is it live updating? Do we get to see the missile hit the target?
Close. It's not live updating, but so this is mine. I actually did it slightly differently, but in the end, it has the same result. So each one of these, this is the first generation. This is the closest, the best missile. Okay, can you see that? They got 400 meters away.
Pretty close.
All right, and here's the next generation, 200. The next generation, 100. And you'll notice, though, that these really aren't changing that much. 171 to 172. At this point, we're really just doing minor decimal places. And that's due to the nonlinearity of the problem. We have changing mass when we're firing the rocket. We have drag, which is dependent on the square of velocity. And so it causes really drastic changes in these tiny values. Anyway, you can see with each succeeding generation, it gets a little bit closer until finally I had my stopping radius set to 1. And we can actually take a look and see what this looks like. So what we see here, that's not at all what I wanted. This is every path of the best generation. And I think I'm actually firing like 500 of these. And so this is just the one that was the closest. If I was plotting all of them, they'd be like a big flower because they're firing in all directions. But you can see that it really does zoom in. I can't zoom in. Okay. Yeah. It's a 3D plot. So anyway, now we can run it again. And if we use a different random seed, you'll see this one took a little bit longer. And we can look at what those guys look like. And they overshot it quite a bit there at first. And that other guy undershot there. So we were finally able to hit the target. And you can see this time it's gotten stuck. It's still going. There we go. We got ourselves a random mutation that fixed the problem. So if we were to plot these, we got a big, nice little red line there. That's not the right answer. So, oh, you know what? I think I may have eliminated that other answer by putting the drag coefficient up. I wonder what would happen if I changed that. Drag coefficient. If I drop this down, remake that, and now let's run you again. No. Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, it's kind of cool. Pretty pictures. So that is the extra credit project. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. I think it's really cool. It'd be good practice coding because this is actually a very difficult project. It'd be good practice for organizing code. You should put things in classes, put things in separate files, put things in functions because there's a lot that's going on here. You could have an organism class or a missile class if you don't want to call it an organism. But and then you'd have a population class that contains all of them and manages them. And then on the other side, you'd have the Rungakata, where it's a set of functions that you can feed it 2 double values and it will fire a rocket and return the minimum distance. So it'd be good practice for proper coding, I guess. I don't know the right word. So anyway, that's all I have for you today. I will have a lecture tomorrow. I got to figure out what that is. Any suggestions? Alrighty. If that's all, then we'll go ahead and close up class.